The knock came so soft it could have been the wind, but it wasn't. In the dying light of a Wyoming evening, one quiet life was about to open its door to a storm it never saw coming. And sometimes, all it takes to change two destinies is a single moment of mercy. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The last strands of daylight thinned over the foothills as Cole Hardy brought the axe down one final time, splitting a stubborn log that had resisted longer than it should have. His breath drifted out in short clouds, and a dull ache pulsed through his arms from the steady rhythm he'd kept since late afternoon. He gathered the pieces and stacked them carefully against the cabin wall, placing each log with the same deliberate precision he used for everything, wasting neither motion nor space. The temperature dropped by the minute. Cole rubbed the back of his neck and looked out across the open stretch of land, long grass, backed dirt and distant hills fading into shadow. No sounds but the wind and the occasional shift of cattle. He preferred it that way, predictable, quiet, a place where thoughts didn't crowd him the way people did. Inside, he nudged the door closed and let the stove's warmth wrap around him. The cabin was small but solid, one bed, one table, one chair, shelves he'd built with his own hands. A lantern hung on the wall, its glow stretching across the boards and dissolving into the corners. He'd lived alone long enough that silence felt like another beam in the structure. He set his hat on the hook and reached for the kettle, planning to warm water for supper. His mind drifted through the evening ahead. Mend a strap, eat something simple, maybe read a page or two from the weathered book beside the bed. Nothing unusual, nothing that stirred old memories. Then a sound cut through it all. A knock, soft, quick, uncertain. Cole froze, hands still on the kettle handle as he listened. No one came out this far unless they were lost. Another knock followed, weaker this time, as if the person wasn't sure they should try again. A cold tightness settled in his chest. Trouble rarely arrived loud. It came like this, quiet, hesitant. He set the kettle down and walked toward the door. Boots pressing lightly on the floorboards, instincts sharpening. Years alone had taught him caution with surprises. At the door he paused, listening for footsteps, breathing, voices, anything. Only the wind brushed the cabin walls. He unlatched the lock and opened the door a few inches. Lantern light spilled outside and caught the shape of a woman standing on the dirt. She wasn't from around here, and she wasn't all right. Her clothes were torn in several places, hanging unevenly from her shoulders. Bare feet pressed into the frozen ground, reddened by wind and rough terrain. Her hair hung long and tangled, strands stuck to her cheeks from sweat and cold. She breathed fast and shallow, like she'd run until her body could go no farther. She lifted her face slightly. Her eyes, dark, wide, rimmed with exhaustion, told him everything. She had been running from something and she'd run out of ground. When she spoke, her voice cracked. "I want to give birth to a white baby. Please, let me in." The words struck him harder than he let show. His expression stayed still, but something shifted inside him, not because of the request, but because of the desperation wrapped around it. Her jaw trembled. She clutched her shawl as if expecting him to tear it away. Her whole body looked ready to collapse. Cole had seen fear before, men in fights, horses in storms, cattle during floods, but this was different. This fear was brittle, quiet, on the edge of breaking. He stepped back without a word, a simple movement that opened the space. He kept enough distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. She crossed the threshold slowly, like she didn't trust her legs to hold. Cole closed the door carefully so the wind wouldn't steal the warmth. Heat from the stove reached her in small waves, and she paused, letting her breathing settle. Her hands shook as she clutched the shawl. She expected him to demand something. He could see it plainly. Instead, he walked to the stove, opened the firebox, and added wood. Flames brightened, throwing stronger light across her tired face. He moved slowly, deliberately.
"Careful not to startle her,"
then nodded toward the chair nearest the heat. "Sit there, warmer." His voice stayed low and even. She hesitated, eyes flicking toward him, searching for hidden meaning. He didn't step closer. He simply waited. Finally, she sat, pulling the blanket from the chair around her shoulders. Her breathing steadied a little. Firelight softened the tension in her face. though her gaze followed his every movement, deciding whether she had stepped into safety or another trap. "My name is Tar," she whispered, eyes fixed on the stove. Cole nodded once.
Cole Hardy.
He filled the kettle and sat near the heat. No questions. He could have asked why she came, what she meant, who might be chasing her, but she looked like someone who'd been forced to explain herself too many times already. So he gave her what she needed most, quiet that didn't hurt. As the fire crackled, he watched her from the corner of his eye, the way she gripped the blanket, the way her feet stayed tucked beneath her like she expected someone to grab her. Old memories stirred in his chest. Moments when he'd arrived too late, when he couldn't help. He pushed them down. This moment wasn't about him. When the water warmed, he made tea and set the cup within her reach without touching her, then stepped back. She stared at it for a long time before lifting it with trembling fingers. The heat surprised her. Her chin quivered slightly. She was holding herself together by a thread. Cole said nothing. The stove hummed softly, wind brushing the walls outside, lantern light flickering across two strangers, who understood the same truth in different ways. Sometimes survival came down to one door staying open. Tar woke before dawn, eyes snapping open in the dim cabin light. For a few seconds she didn't breathe, unsure where she was. The ceiling above her wasn't canvas or branches, it was smooth, worn wood, and the air held warmth instead of cold wind. She pushed herself up slowly. Her body ached everywhere she expected, but the ache came from exhaustion, not blows. The blanket Cole had given her still wrapped her shoulders, and the bed beneath her felt impossibly soft compared to the ground she'd known. She hadn't meant to sleep. She'd planned to stay awake, listening for danger, but her body had surrendered the moment it felt safe. Cole sat near the window on a low stool, dawn outlining his shape as he cleaned a rifle with slow, practiced strokes. He didn't look at her right away, giving her time to wake fully. She watched him quietly, unsure how much space she was allowed to take. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. "Water's in the basin. Bread on the table. Eat if you need," he said, calm and plain, then went back to his work. She rose carefully, legs stiff, feet whispering against the boards as she crossed to wash. The cool water woke her fully. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the lingering instinct to stay unseen. She glanced at him again. He stayed focused, posture easy, not watching her like prey or property. That unsettled her more than anything. At the table, she took a piece of bread and ate slowly, half expecting she should save some. Food had never been certain. Cole finished with the rifle and stood, the chair scraping softly. She tensed before she could stop herself. He paused, coat halfway on. "You're safe here. No emphasis, no softness, just fact." She nodded quickly. When he stepped outside, he left the door open a crack, not enough to let the cold in, just enough to show it wasn't locked. The gesture struck her harder than she expected. It felt like freedom. She finished eating and looked around, unwilling to sit idle. She folded the blanket, swept the floor, washed the mug. By the time Cole returned carrying a sack of feed, her nerves had settled into something steadier. "I will work," she said, urgency tightening her voice. "You let me stay." "I work for you." He set the sack down and studied her. Not suspicious, just trying to understand the fear that still clung to her posture. "You don't owe me anything." Confusion crossed her face. "I didn't come for free. I can cook, clean, help outside." He turned a tin cup in his hand. "Help if you want, not because you have to." Kindness without a price felt dangerous. She stepped back, then forced herself forward again. "Show me what you do." He glanced at her bare feet, crouched by a crate, and set out thick socks and worn boots. "Too cold without these." She stared at them, waiting for the cost. When none came, she pulled them on, voice barely audible. "Thank you," he nodded. Outside, the cold bit her cheeks, but the boots kept the ground from cutting into her feet. She followed him to the barn, keeping distance. He showed her how to carry hay in smaller bundles, demonstrating slowly, letting her mirror the motion. They worked in quiet rhythm, side by side. By midday, her breathing steadied. By afternoon, she realized hours had passed without feeling hunted. And when the sun dipped and they returned, Cole opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she crossed a threshold without fear sitting on her shoulders. Night settled slowly, the cold pressing against the cabin while the stove's glow deepened. They sat near the heat, hands around a cooling cup. Cole worked at the table, repairing a leather strap under the lantern's halo. Movements careful and unhurried. She watched him quietly, studying the steadiness in his silence, the way it didn't crowd her. Finally, she set the cup down. Cole. His hands paused, but he didn't rush her. I should tell you why I'm here. He leaned back slightly, giving her space. Her shoulders curled inward as the memories rose. My people cast me out, she said. He lifted his eyes, steady, unreadable. They wanted me given to an older man. I refused. He had influence. No one argued. They said I shamed them. I left. Some followed. Her voice thinned. They chased me. Not to bring me back. To punish me. To take what they wanted. I thought if I came to a white man's door and offered myself, it might keep them away. Cole didn't flinch. He let the words settle. Then, quietly, you're safe here. She swallowed. You don't even know me. You're safe here, he repeated, the same calm certainty. Relief tightened her chest in a way she didn't trust yet. You said those words because you were desperate, he added. I understand that. She nodded slowly. I didn't take you in for that. Silence followed, warm and steady.
She pulled the blanket closer.
Breathing easier than she had in days, and for the first time let her eyes close without fear. Cole watched a moment, then returned to his work, stitching leather with renewed focus, not just fixing a strap, but quietly making sure she had something solid to hold on to in the days ahead. The following morning settled into a rhythm neither expected but both accepted. Frost silvered the grass as Cole stepped out for chores, and by the third day Tar was already pulling on the oversized boots before he reached the door, falling into step beside him as if she'd always been there. Outside, her eyes still scanned the horizon. Old instincts slow to fade, but Cole didn't tell her to relax. Instead, he showed her the steady routine that anchored him, teaching without pressure, letting the quiet do the work words never could. Morning came softer than the days before, the sky pale and open over the foothills, as if the land itself had exhaled. Cole finished at the barn and found Tar standing by the fence, line, watching the horizon not with fear this time, but with quiet thought. The wind tugged lightly at her hair, and for the first time since she arrived, her shoulders weren't drawn tight. He stopped a few steps away, giving her the same space he always had. You can stay as long as you need, he said simply. She looked at him, eyes clear, the exhaustion that once lived there replaced by something steadier. I know, she answered. The words carried gratitude, but also certainty. She no longer sounded like someone asking permission to exist. Days turned into weeks with the same gentle rhythm. Work shared in silence, small meals, the steady comfort of routine. Tar learned the land the way Cole had, step by step, until the wide spaces no longer felt like something to fear. One evening, as the sun burned gold behind the hills, she stood in the doorway of the cabin, looking out across the fields. I used to think safety was a place, she said quietly. Cole leaned against the porch post, listening. But it's not. It's a choice someone makes for you, when they don't have to. He nodded, not searching for a reply. The light faded, and the first stars appeared, sharp and clear in the Wyoming sky. Inside, the stove glowed warm, the same steady heat that had welcomed her that first night. Tuss stepped back across the threshold, no hesitation, no fear, only the calm of someone who had finally stopped running. And in the quiet that followed, two lives continued side by side, not bound by debt or promise, but by something simpler. A door once opened and never closed again.